Cars are a huge expense for most people. Between the initial cost of the car, maintenance, and insurance, cars can be a black hole for money. For exactly this reason, the average person is fastidious about keeping their car in good condition. But sometimes owners are forced to leave their vehicles unattended, leaving them vulnerable to decay. Today, we're looking at the 10 craziest vehicles that were abandoned. More than 50 years ago, on July 4, 1965, a car created by a handful of California hot rod enthusiasts won America its first FIA road racing championship. That machine, the 1964 Shelby Cobra Daytona Coupe, was the brainchild of designer Peter Brock. From Carroll Shelby's shop in Los Angeles, it went to Daytona, Sebring, and Europe, and chiefly it took down Ferrari, winner of 10 FIA sports car titles in the previous 12 years. Just 6 Daytona Coupes were made. The car fit into a loophole in FIA rules that allowed manufacturers to rebody an existing model for competition, the same loophole that produced the iconic Ferrari 250 GTO, the Daytona's main rival. As such, the Daytona was mechanically identical to Shelby's Cobra Roadster, complete with a 289 Ford V8. That makes it particularly shocking that a model valued at $4 million was found abandoned in someone's garage after nearly 30 years of sitting in disuse. Because it was one of only 6 cars ever produced, the vanishing act was even more amazing. More than 200 cars, including many luxury sedans, have been lying abandoned for years in a public car park in southwestern China. Among the abandoned vehicles that have become overgrown with weeds in Chengdu, Sichuan province are Audis, Mercedes-Benzes, Bentleys, and Land Rovers, West China Economic Daily reports. Some of the cars have been kept in the same place for more than 2 years as bushes and trees grow up around them, shielding them from the outside world. The 2 Bentleys, one a Bentley Continental GT and another Bentley Flying Spur, are worth at least 3 million yuan each in China. The majority of the vehicles are involved in ongoing criminal cases, either directly or indirectly, which means they can't be claimed by their owners. Others have been abandoned as they were ready to be scrapped, or their owners lacked the correct paperwork. Police said the criminal cases involved complicated processes, and multiple departments had to work together to resolve the issues. Last year, local authorities decided to allow courts to auction the abandoned vehicles involved in more recent cases, the report said. Local public security bureaus were involved in auctions of such cars in the past, it added. Most people were relieved to hear this, because it seems wasteful for the cars to sit and decay in the woods. While most of the abandoned vehicles on this list are cars, this is a notable exception. Dietmar Eckel has traveled the world in pursuit of ruin. His portfolio is filled with mystifyingly beautiful pictures of abandoned buildings, forgotten military sites, and decomposing cars. But back in 2014, he tracked down 15 rotting airplane carcasses left over from crash sites where there were no fatalities and everyone was rescued. The subject matter is the stuff of nightmares. It's impossible to look at the images without white knuckles. Without context, they're devastating. Finding out there were no fatalities is an amazing, surreal reveal, and suddenly the backstories become as compelling as the pictures themselves. Eckel researched the project for almost 3 years, tracking down locations via Google Earth and online archives, then following up with locals to piece together more particulars. These abandoned airplanes are seemingly morbid, but they actually tell an interesting story about their former occupants in the surrounding area. Not only are the planes themselves fascinating, but the terrain that surrounds them is absolutely breathtaking. The series is available in a photo book that can be purchased through the artist's website. Back in 2012, YouTube user Marchiteno found an abandoned Maybach 57 in a parking lot on the French coast. He says that the $500,000 luxury car has been in that spot for approximately 4 years. Taking into account how much dust is on the car, it's been in that place for a very long time. The Maybach emblem is missing, while many people have left their autographs. It looks like the air suspension is given out, as it appears the vehicle is sitting too low, while Marchiteno says that the back tires have a very negative camber. As a reminder, the Maybach 57 came out in 2002, and it has a huge V12 5.5-liter twin-turbo engine that delivers 550 horsepower and a peak torque of 663, enough for a 0 to 62 mile-an-hour sprint in 5.2 seconds, and a top speed of 155 miles per hour, despite the hefty 2,735 kilogram curb weight. The car appears to be abandoned for multiple years, prompted the question, who needed to leave this luxury car in such a hurry? Speculators have conjectured that its former owner was somehow involved in the mob. By some approximations, a Bugatti Veyron is the nicest car in the world. It has a price tag of more than $1.5 million, which made it even more amazing when a man drove it into a shallow lake in Texas. The driver reported he was distracted by a low-flying pelican. In the end, the owner swapped his hypercar for a new Veyron in a different color trim. The crashed car now seems to be up for sale in an insurance salvage auction, according to MotorAuthority.com. The gray 2006 Bugatti Veyron 16.4 Coupe with 1,869 miles on the odometer has a listed cash value of $1.5 million, but will most likely fetch much less due to the car's water damage. For interested parties, the vehicle is filled with salt water. Making it even worse, the owner left the engine running for at least 15 minutes before it finally drowned. But then in 2015, the story got even juicier. KTRE reports the driver had insured the Bugatti for $2.2 million prior to sinking it into the lagoon and received an insurance settlement of $600,000. Evidence later showed in court proved he purposely drove the Bugatti into Gulf Bay, according to Jalopnik. And the Chronicle reports the man pleaded guilty to insurance fraud. According to some, he got off surprisingly easy, as he had faced up to 20 years in prison for the crime and only received a 1-year sentence. It was February 1978, and a group of kids were digging in the mud outside a house at 1137 West 119th Street in the West Athens section of Los Angeles. Just below the surface, they struck something that felt like the roof of a car. They flagged down a sheriff's cruiser. After assessing the yard, Sergeants Joe Sabas and Dennis Carroll decided that they would need to assemble a team. The next day, the two detectives, aided by a skip loader and some helpers with shovels, returned to the home and found out just how unusual their discovery was. What the men uncovered was a green 1974 Ferrari, a car worth at least $18,000 new. That means the car would be worth the equivalent of almost $70,000 today. But even once the car was unearthed, the mystery remained unsolved. They were able to trace it to a buyer named Rosendo Cruz of Alhambra, but he had reported the car stolen after owning it for only 2 years. Cruz had purchased the car as a gift for his wife, but it was stolen while they were out to dinner in Los Angeles. What happened between that night and the day it was discovered in 1978, no one knows. But this mystery piqued the interest of people all over the world. It seems nearly impossible to bury a full-size car in a busy neighborhood without arousing suspicion from the neighbors. But that is exactly what happened to this Ferrari. A vehicle left to rot under the open sky in a forest for 45 years fetched $475,000 at an Arizona auction back in 2017. The classic car was found in a terrible state, having been driven for the last time many years ago. It would be hard to comprehend how a vehicle in such condition can be so highly prized, but this was no ordinary car. The Aston Martin DB4 was the first production car capable of doing 0 to 100 miles per hour in less than 30 seconds when it was launched in 1958. But at some stage in the early 1970s, a 1960 model was parked in the woods at the owner's home in Massachusetts, where it remained until recently. During the decades it lay unused, the car was exposed to the elements and buried in leaves and vegetation, turning it into a non-running wreck. To bring the car back to its former glory, a lot of hard work is needed. The rarity and desirability of this model, as well as the curious story behind it, were probably responsible for pushing up the sale price at the auction, where it was sold for almost $500,000. A garage full of 36 vintage Corvettes was found underneath a New York home in 2015. The classic American muscle cars were originally won in a competition organized by music channel VH1 and were then sold to German-born graphic artist Peter Max, who wanted to incorporate them in his work. Though Mr. Max started to carry out his plan for the cars, issues such as a tax fraud case forced them on the back burner, and he eventually sold the fleet to a collector. The most incredible thing is that these cars represent one model from each production year, between 1953, when the car made its debut, and 1989. The cool thing about these cars is the entire collection stayed together all this time, said Chris Mazzilli, a longtime Corvette enthusiast, who is also an owner of the Gotham Comedy Club in Manhattan. He called the cars the largest Corvette barn find in history. In 2020, they'll be given away in a contest. It will be the second time they have been served as contest prizes, but this time the collection will be broken up. There will be 36 winners, not just one. When you think of visiting a tropical island, most people think of beautiful beaches, crystal blue waters, and lush tropical surroundings. But a very special beach in Puerto Rico is home to all of these things, and another very odd element, a World War II tank. Flamenco Beach is undeniably gorgeous. It regularly appears on top global beaches lists. In fact, TripAdvisor rated it the world's 8th best. Its mile-long white crescent hugs a clear, calm bay. Only the concession stand and a small hotel interrupt the palm trees flanking the sand. Pelicans and boobies dive into the water, and the tanks here are left over from military exercises in the Second World War. Just before the Second World War in 1939, the island's Flamenco Beach was used by the U.S. Navy for training exercises to test their soldiers and their bombs. Since then, the tanks have become fixtures of the beach. A North Carolina garage was opened for the first time in decades, unveiling some of the rarest sports cars in the world, with a preliminary estimated value of $4 million. Among the finds was a 1967 Ferrari 275 GTB, one of only a handful built with an alloy body. Amazingly, the svelte silver coupe only has 13,000 miles on the clock. Under the hood is a 2-cam V12, designed by Gioacchino Colombo, sporting 3 twin-throat Weber carburetors. The Ferrari was initially priced at $1 million, but that price quickly climbed to $2.53 million when it was sold at auction.